United States, the land of promise, the heart of the American dream. But within this great nation lie darker corners, cities where taking the wrong turn could cost you everything. Today, I'll walk with you through the 10 most dangerous places in the U.S. in 2025, not to spread fear, but to understand. Because once we grasp the root causes, we can choose better, for ourselves and for the future. 10. Chicago, Illinois. Chicago, the Windy City, the city of towering skyscrapers, of struggles, of art, and symbols that once made America proud. But that glow, by 2025, has cracked beyond what jazz tunes or polished tourism brochures can cover. With a crime rate of 13,135 per 100,000 people, Chicago is no longer a place where you live. It's a place where you survive. Areas like West Garfield Park have become textbook examples of urban failure. Here, community has been replaced by gang, and justice is more likely delivered through a barrel than a courtroom. Gunfire in broad daylight no longer shocks anyone. It's become the background noise of daily life. What shook me wasn't the shootings. It was that no one seemed shaken anymore. I don't believe a city like Chicago, once a cradle of modern architecture and labor movements, ended up here solely because of crime. No, crime is just a symptom. The real disease lies in corrupted power, in a stagnant style of politics, where leaders cling to seats while the people fend for themselves in chaos. This city doesn't lack money. Chicago is a financial hub, a national transportation artery. But the money doesn't reach the right hands. It's bled into half-baked projects, symbolic policing campaigns, and community initiatives that exist only in slide decks. Meanwhile, neighborhoods like West Garfield Park remain soaked in blood and hopelessness. I walked those streets, where a 14-year-old doesn't dream of becoming an engineer or an artist, but simply wishes to survive past 16. Reform policies. Don't talk about them like they're working. They're band-aids on wounds that cut to the bone. City officials talk a lot, do little, and most of what they do lacks strategy. They speak of community, but don't listen to it. They invest in policing, but not in people. The result is a divided city. One side is glass towers downtown, the other, sirens and flashing red-blue lights, signaling an endless Cold War. I don't blame Chicago's residents. I blame the people running this city for letting it fall into hands they can't or won't control. I'm not disappointed that Chicago is dangerous. I'm furious that it was allowed to become dangerous. And in the silence, from officials, voters, even distant onlookers, Chicago is dying, not from bullets, but from apathy. Number 9, Atlanta, Georgia. Crime rate, 44.8 per 1,000 residents. Oakland City at the heart of the violence. Atlanta, known as the heart of the modern South, a cultural and creative powerhouse, a city of music, media, and black entrepreneurship rising. But Atlanta, too, beneath the glitz, is a place where you can die for a wrong glance, a wrong moment, a wrong intersection. In 2025, Atlanta's crime rate can't be hidden behind quarterly improvements or seasonal drops. It's an undeniable truth. With over 22,000 reported crimes in just 1 year, that means nearly 45 out of every 1,000 people become victims, a number that in any developed nation should force a total governmental overhaul. I once had a good impression of Atlanta, like many others, enchanted by the CNN glow, the pulse of hip-hop, the vibrancy of startups. But then I walked through Oakland City, a name that sounds like a peaceful district, but in reality is Atlanta's red zone. There, you feel a tension waiting to ignite. The air is different, not because of gun smoke, but because of the erosion of trust etched into every glance. Crime here isn't a choice, it's a consequence of unjust zoning policies, of investments funneled into the urban core while poor suburbs are left to fend for themselves. I'm not surprised city officials still try to paint over the cracks with PR polish. Community safety programs, youth education drives, justice reform efforts, all buzzwords aimed at votes, not change. What Oakland City needs isn't staged town halls with cameras rolling. It needs schools that don't close from budget cuts, cops who know residents by name, not badge number, streets that don't go pitch black at sundown, and dreams that don't end with sirens. Atlanta is falling into the same trap that many major U.S. cities have: growth without equity, development without responsibility. It's creating two cities in one for global conferences and rooftop bar selfies, the other, where 10-year-olds already know how to tell real gunshots from fireworks. Without a major jolt, from the community itself and the state level, I don't believe Atlanta will escape this spiral, and more importantly, I'm not sure its leaders even want to, or if they've just mastered how to spin the nightmare into something that looks good on camera. Atlanta doesn't need more promises. It needs a complete blood transfusion in its urban management thinking, because if not, neighborhoods like Oakland City will remain symbols of a politics that only pretends to care, and that is the greatest crime of all. 8, New Orleans, Louisiana. Danger zones, Central City, 7th Ward. Violent crime and theft remain a lingering shadow. New Orleans, the city of wandering spirits, of music that never stops, where art and superstition blend into an identity that can't be duplicated. But behind the Mardi Gras smiles, the cocktails on Bourbon Street, is a different New Orleans, one where blood and tears are spilled in silence. Crime here isn't news anymore. It's the climate, an inseparable part of daily life, especially in places like Central City or the 7th Ward, where histories of struggle, poverty, and failed policy weave into a picture as bleak as it is brutal. I'm not surprised tourists still flock to New Orleans, still calling it a magical city, because the magic here doesn't lie in safety. It lies in the fact that people still live, still love, still play music amid collapse. But I refuse to romanticize tragedy. I can't sit still knowing that a young black man in the 7th Ward is more likely to be shot by mistake than to graduate college. And what chokes me up isn't the statistics, it's the deafening silence from those in power. Local leaders have repeatedly declared they will improve things. These declarations sound like prayers at a mass where no one believes in God anymore. They launch community anti-violence programs, post rewards, hold workshops, but skip the most important thing: reinvesting in people. Central City was once the heartbeat of the black community. Now it's home to abandoned houses, unemployed youth, and children growing up amid gang violence ghosts. Meanwhile, the 7th Ward, rich in cultural heritage, is dying under the weight of crime and half-baked gentrification, where longtime residents are pushed out to make room for art districts never meant for them. I once spoke with a mother in the 7th Ward who lost 2 sons in 2 consecutive years, one to a stray bullet, one to drugs. She told me something I'll never forget. We don't need more police, we need reasons to live. And that's what New Orleans lacks most: reasons to live for those who've been forgotten. New Orleans shouldn't be a city tourists breeze through just to return home with stories told in awe. It needs to be treated as an inseparable part of America, not just for its history, but for its painfully present moment. I love this city, which is exactly why I can't forgive the neglect it's enduring. Because one day, if New Orleans collapses, it won't just be the fall of a city. It'll be living proof of the deep rot inside America's heart. And when that happens, no band will be loud enough to fill the silence it leaves behind. 7, Cleveland, Ohio. Chance of becoming a victim: 1 in 17. Scoville Avenue is one of the most dangerous areas in the country, Cleveland. A city once proud to be the industrial icon of the American Midwest. Once a cradle of technology, steel, and hope. But in 2025, Cleveland isn't where things are made, it's where things give up. The crime rate here doesn't need deep analysis, because when your odds of becoming a victim are 1 in 17, it's no longer a risk, it's an inevitability. And when I mention Scoville Avenue, I'm not just talking about a street, but a criminal ecosystem, where entire communities have learned to survive instability as a reflex. Cleveland didn't become dangerous just because of crime, but because of the total absence of expectation. When the factories shut down, jobs vanished, and the government chose to pour money into performing arts centers instead of schools, people got the message. The American dream no longer included them. I once met a 19-year-old there who had been arrested for carrying a weapon. When I asked why he had a gun, he said, "Try living here a week without one. No anger, no bravado, just a raw statement as if he'd long accepted the rules of survival. Here, if you're not defending yourself, you're a dead man walking." What makes Cleveland alarming isn't just the crime. It's the erasure of history and the quiet undercurrent of racial disparity in public policy. This was once home to a thriving white working-class middle. Now, it's a hollowed-out city, stripped of resources, people, and hope. Gangs rise not from moral failure, but from a lack of alternatives. Drugs flood the streets not because people are broken, but because they need something to escape with. If not from reality, then from themselves. And the state government? Still in meetings to install more cameras, meetings to draft recommendations, meetings to declare Cleveland is improving. Improving how? When a 7-year-old knows how to dive under a desk before he knows how to spell his own name? I don't believe Cleveland is beyond hope, but I know for certain it's out of time to be ignored. And if anyone still thinks this is a poor people's issue, or a black neighborhood issue, or a lower class problem, remember this. When a city loses control, it doesn't collapse alone. The death of Cleveland will send cracks into every corner of America, and when that day comes, don't ask why the night is no longer silent. Ask why no one dares to speak anymore. 6. Oakland, California population. $433,000, a city of two faces, one of startups, the other of tragedy in motion. Oakland, often referred to as San Francisco's rebellious sibling, but to me, Oakland is the clearest evidence of America's failure to balance prosperity with justice. It has everything to become a beacon of modern America. Strategic location, multicultural community, potential in tech and the arts, and a vibrant intellectual class. But all of that seems confined to a few square miles around downtown. The rest of Oakland is made up of neighborhoods where crime maps never stop lighting up red. People often compare this city to a scrambled Rubik's Cube, both a symbol of reconstruction and a victim of half-baked gentrification, where poor neighborhoods are priced out, forcing longtime residents to leave, but with no social infrastructure to replace what's lost. The result? A community both enraged and disoriented. A generation of youth cornered between poverty and violence, unemployment and drugs. A city where, on one side of the street, millions are poured into co-working spaces and artisan coffee shops, while on the other side, people bow their heads at the sound of police sirens. I once witnessed a morning in Oakland. Downtown, a conference on innovation was in full swing, with startup CEOs discussing the future of smart cities. Less than 3 kilometers away, a daylight shooting unfolded outside a laundromat. No one stopped, no one panicked, because this isn't shocking anymore, it's the new normal. Oakland is where inequality isn't something you read in stats, it's something you walk through. If you're born in the right zip code, you might study STEM, join a hackathon, land an internship at Google. But if you're born on the wrong side of town, you learn to hide a knife in your backpack, because no one's got your back but you. The issue isn't lack of budget. Oakland's city government has spent generously on security and community reconciliation. The issue is who the money serves. When wealthy areas receive tighter protection, while poor neighborhoods are over-policed and harshly punished, crime doesn't go away. It evolves. From street violence to institutional neglect, from mugging to robbing young black teens of their future. I don't deny Oakland's fierce spirit, but that's exactly why I'm outraged to see it managed like a social experiment, pushing native residents out, pouring investment into safe zones, then holding press conferences to announce Oakland is transforming. It's a slap in the face to those suffering daily without notice. Without awareness and a justice-rooted policy shift, Oakland won't simply be lost, like people say. It will be taken, piece by piece, from the hands of those who deserve to stay. And by the time we realize it, it may be too late. Not for the city, but for the conscience of our society. B5, St. Louis, Missouri. Crime rate, 87 per 1,000 residents. Downtown leads the nation in total criminal incidents. St. Louis, once the gateway to the American West, where the Gateway Arch proudly rose as a symbol of expansion and promise. But today, St. Louis no longer stands for conquest. It's a raw, unfiltered image of a society shrinking into fear. The crime rate here doesn't need to be illustrated by charts. You only need to walk into downtown to feel the unease. It comes to you like instinct. I don't need stats about 158 murders in 2023 to understand this city is drowning. I only need to see the eyes of elderly pedestrians, constantly glancing over their shoulders, or storefronts shutting down before sundown. In a civilized society, That shouldn't happen, but in St. Louis it's become a survival ritual. I used to think the worst thing in a city was the absence of law, but then I realized, worse still is when the law exists only on paper, while in reality, people bargain for their lives daily with crime, using silence, detours, and resignation. Police aren't lacking in St. Louis, but trust is gone. You can't build order on a foundation of fear and prejudice. You can't ask citizens to cooperate when they're the ones most hurt by decades of incompetence and neglect. St. Louis isn't a random victim of crime waves. It's the outcome of gradual collapse, of racially segregated housing policy, of tiered education systems, and of dividing the city into protected zones and forgotten zones. Crime here doesn't start with a gun. It starts with dropout rates, joblessness, and despair. When I see how the St. Louis government responds, with more police patrols, with promises of enhanced downtown security, I see nothing but patchwork. They're putting out fires while gasoline leaks underground. The question isn't, when will St. Louis recover, but who has the courage to speak the truth and rebuild from the ground up? This city doesn't need more cameras. It needs fairness. It doesn't need more promises. It needs the guts to confront what politics has ignored for too long. St. Louis was once the crossroads of hope, of westward dreams, of Golden Age America. But unless it's reborn from its roots, it will become a monument of nostalgia, a city abandoned by history, slipping into the shadows while its leaders still present slides about untapped potential. Potential saves no one when residents are dying in their own homes, and if we stay silent, that death won't just belong to St. Louis, it will belong to the very idea of a livable city America once claimed to stand for. R4, Baltimore, Maryland. Violent crime rate, 1,922 per 100,000 residents. Middle East isn't the Middle East, but where death quietly multiplies in the heart of America. Baltimore, nicknamed Charm City. But the charm here hasn't come from bustling seaports or colonial heritage in a long time. It comes from contradiction. A city home to one of the nation's top hospitals and universities, Johns Hopkins, located just blocks away from neighborhoods so violent that even police officers hesitate to intervene. I don't call that irony. I call it cruelty, when knowledge and life sit only a few streets from death, and no bridge connects the two. Middle East, a name that sounds like a faraway region, is actually a neighborhood in Baltimore, where children learn to drop to the floor at the sound of a bang before they learn to read. Not war, not natural disaster, but the living consequence of a system that drained black communities and then abandoned them in a spiral of self-destruction. Crime in Baltimore isn't isolated. It's structured, modeled, and cyclical. It's the byproduct of prolonged failure in budgeting, education, healthcare, and civic trust. I've met men in their 30s who've never traveled more than 5 blocks from their homes, not because they didn't want to, but because they understood the invisible boundaries between where you're allowed to exist and where you're not worth anything. I've spoken to mothers working 3 jobs a day just to keep their children from becoming the next evening headline, and I saw one thing clearly. These people don't lack willpower. They lack a society willing to listen. Baltimore's government has launched wave after wave of initiatives, ramped up patrols, community police relations campaigns, even a year of restoring trust. But who asked, trust in what? Who still believes, when even the death of Freddie Gray, which shook the nation in 2015, was swept into the void of endless investigations and eventual forgetfulness? People say the city has made progress. But where, when your odds of being a victim of violent crime are still 1 in 64, and for theft, 1 in 30? Maybe progress is a concept reserved for neighborhoods with paved playgrounds, 4K security cameras, and community safe zone signs meant to soothe investors. I'm not against Baltimore. I stand with those who still try every day in silence. I believe the collapse here isn't an end, but a last chance to start again. But that won't come from outside, not from suited politicians posing with kids for the camera. It must come from the city itself, from the courage to look in the mirror and admit the pain has been institutionalized for far too long. Baltimore isn't dying because of crime. It's dying because it's treated like an unavoidable accident. And if America still has an ounce of integrity left in its talk of democracy and justice, then let it begin by saving Baltimore, not with money, but with real action. real accountability, and the willingness to break the cycle of failure tightening around this city day after day. If not, Charm City will have nothing left charming but the tragedy rewritten year after year in news reports no one bothers to finish reading. 3. Birmingham, Alabama. Violent crime rate, 1,682 per 100,000 people. A civil rights legacy cracking under violence and neglect, Birmingham, the city that once stood at the heart of the American civil rights movement, where blood and tears of activists stained the sidewalks in pursuit of justice, equality, and freedom. But in 2025, the name Birmingham no longer rings as a call to progress. It appears more often in crime reports, where the violence rate is nearly 4 times the national average. And ironically, the communities most impacted, places like Ensley, Jones Valley, or Garden Highlands, are the very ones that sacrificed the most for America's democratic dream. You don't need to read dozens of reports to know what's happening. You just need to walk past the rows of crumbling homes, the shuttered schools, or a gas station where every pair of eyes trails your back. Not out of curiosity, but caution. Here, people learn to live with danger the same way they learn to breathe. No one asks questions. No one is surprised. What's most terrifying isn't the violence, but that people have accepted it as an unchangeable part of their social structure. I once asked a middle-aged man in Ensley what he thought had brought his city to this point. He just looked at me, gave a wry smile, and said, "We used to fight to be treated like human beings. Now the kids fight just to survive past 18. That answer said it all. From a thriving industrial hub, Birmingham has become a symbol of decline, not just in infrastructure, but in the moral fabric of governance. The city's leaders probably know this. But instead of rebuilding from the ground up, they chose suppression over recovery, prisons over libraries, budgets for SWAT teams over opportunities for a new generation. No one denies that Birmingham once had its golden age, but that's the past, and the past doesn't feed the present. The legal victories of the 1960s can't silence the gunshots of the 2020s. The bitter truth is this: a city once symbolic of freedom is now one of the most fragile places for freedom to exist. I'm not saying Birmingham has no hope, but I won't lie to you and say it's on the mend, because it's not. The official statistics may show a dip, but that doesn't reflect what people feel. Where trust in government, in law, in the future, has run dry. This city needs more than PR campaigns. It needs a moral jolt, a full acknowledgement from state to federal level that places like Birmingham cannot keep being ignored simply because their gunshots don't echo all the way into Congress chambers. If not, Birmingham's legacy won't be the civil rights story, but a bitter lesson in how a nation can forget the very communities that fought to make it free. And when that forgetting becomes routine, the death of justice won't be hypothetical. It'll be real, day after day, night after night, in stories no one bothers to tell. The 2. Memphis, Tennessee. Violent crime rate, 2,420 per 100,000 people. Where blues music doesn't just rise from sorrow, but from blood-stained reality, Memphis. The cradle of blues, where soulful melodies were born from the pain of the oppressed. But today, the sobs in the songs are no longer metaphors. They're the wail of ambulance sirens in the night, the lonely gunshot in a Parkway Village alley, the deep sigh of a mother called once again to identify her child at the morgue. Memphis has gone far beyond conventional danger, with 2,420 violent incidents per 100,000 people. This city is no longer one to be cautiously warned about, but one where people must seriously ask, is this still a place I can call home? I don't hate Memphis. On the contrary, I love it. I love the energy of Beale Street, the musical legacy, the resilience in its communities, and that's exactly why I can't look away as Memphis barrels downhill, while those in power keep applying makeup to a corpse. Neighborhoods like Whithaven, Oakhaven, Coro Lake are no longer mentioned as parts of the city. They're referenced like anomalies, like infections to be quarantined. But these wounds didn't appear on their own. They are the result of decades of misdirected investment, building tourist entertainment centers while neglecting public education, pouring money into sleek police headquarters while classrooms leak, lack teachers, and lack exits. I once walked through South Memphis in the afternoon. Golden sunlight, trees rustling, children playing out front. It all seemed peaceful. But then an elderly woman pulled me aside and whispered, Walk faster. Don't linger. The sun's going down. Around here, when it's dark, the rules change hands. That sentence still haunts me, not because it was a warning, but because it acknowledged that Memphis has two parallel worlds, one for visitors and one for residents, where the law is just a prop for press conferences. Memphis officials have launched initiative after initiative. Memphis safe, youth first, no more violence. But let's be honest, those names sound like empty vows, because when programs exist just to raise funds or polish reports, while residents see no change other than their neighbors getting shot each month, what's left to hold them here? Loyalty to the city, love for hometown, or simply not enough money to leave? I don't blame the people of Memphis. I blame the system. The system that turned this city into a stage where blood runs real, but people still watch like it's just a play. I blame the way leaders cherry-pick which areas to develop, which faces to help, and even which truths to release. While the things you can't choose, like being born in the wrong zip code, determine your whole life. If Memphis still wants to be worthy of its legacy, the legacy of defiant melodies, of Martin Luther King, of a community that once helped change American history, then it must stop playing hide-and-seek with reality. It must look its people in the eyes and admit, we have failed, but we will try again, with you. If not, then soon the blues won't be comfort anymore. It will be farewell, a final song for a city that once had a chance, but lost itself by being too good at pretending. Why one? Detroit, Michigan. The U.S. city with the highest crime rate in 2025, a former icon, now a monument to urban collapse. Detroit, once synonymous with American industrial pride, where cars were born, where the middle class rose, and where the American dream burned bright down every street. But in 2025, Detroit is no longer a manufacturing hub. It's a warning sign. The city now officially has the highest crime rate in America, surpassing even Memphis, St. Louis, and the endurance of the thousands still clinging to survival here. Detroit today isn't just a scar. It's an open wound bleeding on the face of America, and people have grown too used to glancing at it before turning away. People often talk about Detroit's collapse as a historical accident, industrial decline, white flight, the largest municipal bankruptcy in U.S. history in 2013. But that's just the surface. What turned Detroit into a dying city wasn't the cars that stopped rolling. It was the people left behind and forgotten. When factories closed, they didn't build schools. They built fences. When investors pulled out, the government didn't support small businesses. It shut down public services. And when crime surged, the answer wasn't reform. It was slashing social aid budgets. I don't use the word failure lightly, but if any place has earned that label, it's Detroit. Here you can walk through an entire neighborhood of abandoned homes, weeds taller than your head, and no one questions why. You can see a teen smoking weed at a rusting bus stop, with no bus ever coming because that line was cut 4 years ago. You can witness a family living in a house with no electricity, in a city once hailed as America's industrial gem. Detroit isn't just dangerous because of violence. It's dangerous because it proves that when a city no longer has economic value, it's stripped of political care too. And what chills me most isn't the murders, the thefts, or the kids carrying knives in their backpacks. It's that the rest of America has accepted it as normal. Detroit, you know how it is. That's what people say whenever bad news comes from here. Apathy has become the default response. I once thought this city had hit bottom, but then I visited Flint, just over 60 miles away, and realized there is no bottom when you're falling in a system without one. Flint is no longer known for clean water, but for lead contamination. A city of 80,000 without safe drinking water. That's not a tragic oversight. That's a systemic crime. And if Flint is the forgotten footnote, Detroit is the headline tragedy. Detroit can't be saved with street murals or co-working spaces for startups. It needs radical surgery in policy, infrastructure investment, and restoring trust. It needs America to look in the mirror and admit, Detroit is not an exception. It's a preview of cities walking the same path. I love Detroit, not for how it looks, but for the memory of what it once led, once inspired, and that's why I won't accept its downfall as destiny. But if no one has the courage to face it, to change it at its roots, then the next time people write about Detroit, there may be nothing left to say but two words. It used to. And that, to me, is the most painful fate a city can suffer. When numbers stop being data and start being blood. We've just traveled through the 10 most dangerous cities in the United States in 2025. Names that should have evoked pride in history, culture, and community, but now stand as deep cracks on the conscience map of America. Chicago, Atlanta, New Orleans, Cleveland, Oakland, St. Louis, Baltimore, Birmingham, Memphis, Detroit, each with its own story, yet all telling the same tragedy. A rupture between the promise of democracy and the reality its people must endure. Crime, in all these cases, isn't the root cause. It's a symptom, the inevitable result of normalized poverty, institutionalized racism, and political decisions made by those who never had to live with the fear of being shot, going hungry, or being forgotten. When a 13-year-old in Baltimore knows how to dodge bullets better than how to write a resume, the system has failed. When a single mother in Memphis calls 911 knowing the police will arrive after it's over, justice no longer exists. When a teen in Cleveland believes joining a gang is the only way to survive, the American dream has officially become a scam. I'm not telling you this to scare you. I'm telling you so you'll see, so you'll realize that behind every statistic is a human life, a person, a community being eroded daily by a system's indifference. And so you'll understand these cities are not someone else's problem, because if part of a body decays and the rest does nothing, that's not survival. It's a sign of death approaching. The question is, will we stay silent or will we act? If you're American, you have a responsibility. If you're an immigrant, you have the right to know. And if you're just someone trying to understand the world, then now you've seen the darker side of a country that once called itself the light of freedom. True freedom does not exist where people are unprotected. And if America wants to save its soul, it must begin in the places where the light has gone out. Places like Detroit, like St. Louis, like Baltimore, not with slogans, but with real, courageous, and painful action. Because if not, soon this list of top 10 most dangerous cities in America won't just be a warning, it will be a map of the future. A future no one, not even those sitting safely in comfort, would want to live in. And when that day comes, don't say no one warned you, because I just did, every word, right here, right now. If you found this video helpful, don't forget, drop a like to support quality analysis. Share your thoughts in the comments. Have you been to any of these cities? And subscribe to the channel so you don't miss our next deep dive stories.